right, let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to welcome everybody to our latest feature review webinar. My name is Jean Marie Schiraldi, and I am the Director of Customer Success here at QBD Vision. I'll be your moderator for today's session. I have the privilege of introducing two of my colleagues and the presenters for today's session. Some of you may recall Yashka Bayel as a customer presenter at our previous digital CMC summits, but he recently joined us as our Director of Product Management. He is joined today by Natalie Kwan, our product manager. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items with you. All participants will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. Please use the Q&A section on your Zoom toolbar for any questions as we go. So go ahead and write your question in there, and we'll be answering those at the end of the session. And we will also be sharing the recording, the deck, and the Q&A responses after the webinar. All right, next I have a few announcements before handing it over to Yashka and Natalie for the review. As you all know, supporting our customers is always our top focus here at QBD Vision. If you have questions or feedback, or would just like some more information, you can always reach out to your CSM team, email support, or enter a question in our support portal. And if you haven't looked at Knowledge Hub lately, you're really missing out on a ton of new information. So we encourage you to log in soon and check out all the latest information that our team has been adding. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Natalie so she can show you what's new in this release.
All right, thank you, Jean Marie, for that introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and start introducing the features. I want to start with a high-level overview of all of the features that we worked on, specifically highlighting the themes for this release. So what we wanted to do in this release is really take your experience, what you know with QBD Vision, and take that to the next level. We did this by touching upon materials, introducing new drug substance, drug product records, and expanding our risk capabilities. So by creating a more robust foundation, specifically with your process and your product definitions, we're able to capture more information so that you have a better understanding of your process and product definitions, but also set up a foundation for even more complex workflows that we can capture. So the first theme that we start with is robust process models with ERP in mind. So I'm going to go through this in detail, but we expanded our material model. We had input materials. We added intermediate and output materials and a way to explicitly label your materials in relation to your process. Our second theme was right product, right country. This is about, digitally defining your product variations, improving that product definition that's captured in QBD Vision, and managing, your global and regulatory commitments that are made to different markets globally, comparing them to the manufacturing sites and the expectations, for your products. Okay. And then lastly, we expanded risk. And so we added a different type of risk assessment to our product and processes that you can apply. And we know that this is going to help capture kind of the risk information throughout the product lifecycle more accurately. And we know that this is kind of the way, some of you have your risk structures set up. So I'm going to first dive in again to our first theme, which is the robust process models with ERP in mind. And this is all about functionally, we added intermediate and output materials. So here, what we wanted to do is first and foremost, better model the real world processes and expand the material information captured in QBD Vision. Previously, in the existing state, all material records were intended to be input materials. This is how they were designed for. And, when you actually are dealing with the manufacturing process, intermediate materials are really key. They were implicitly called out in our system through intermediate quality attributes and through, material attributes and process parameters. But now we recognize the need to have essentially the explicit call out of the material itself. And then by organizing it this way, by having a labeling system for input, intermediate, and outputs, it's just going to help clarify our reporting and help you create more custom tables and reports that you need. So it advances our existing material model. It now distinguishes the material library for raw input materials. So it makes that functionality more clear. And then it will help us, improve reporting on the materials. And also, again, it creates that foundation. The more robust material definition that you can capture, the better we're set up for the future to unlock kind of more future and more complex capabilities. So here you can see we did this by adding a relationship to process widget, and I'm going to show you a live demo of that in just a few minutes. First, I just want to introduce this diagram just to clarify our thinking of it and to help you as users, understand how to use the widget. So our mental model typically in terms of the different types of materials are that we think about it as at a process level. So we say inputs, are consumed. So if we're baking a cake, this would be your eggs, your flour, your sugar. Intermediate materials are then, processed between steps. So they're actually produced and they exist. They're a little transient within the process. So this would be your dry mixture, your wet mixture, or your batter for your cake. And then the output would be, the cake itself. So we like to use that comparison. So here you really think about as an intermediate existing between steps. So this is our mental model diagram. However, when we apply that to the existing process model or process explorer definition that we have today, we need a more explicit call out for intermediates. And so intermediates actually break down as an output relative to a step and then later consumed as an input. And so this here is really showing what our definition is going to be. You think about this labeling system in terms of the process, and then when it breaks down to steps, you're going to label it as an output first. I produced this material, but then I'm later consuming it within the same process, and that will be an intermediate. So now I can hop into the system to just show you an example. Okay, so here I am in a just mock-up project that we have. I'm going to hop down to affinity chromatography. So I'm in a downstream manufacturing process. And affinity chromatography has the series of buffers. So I'm going to show you the I'll show you the equilibration. You can see here I have an input material, so there's different headings. Your material record will really look the same. It does have this new section here. What you can do, and let me load this. What you'll be able to do here is select the unit operation and step. So you define exactly where this material relates to in regards in your process. So this is going to appear right after the about section. You have that labeling. Think about this, how does this material relate to my process? And then when you actually fill in these fields, you select what step it was produced from or what step it was consumed in. So here's an example of an input where I'm using the same equilibration buffer. I use it as my wash buffer as well. And so I've added that here, and you can add in the function, well, this is my EQ buffer and whatever additional information that you need. The nice part with inputs is you can keep adding additional inputs if desired, or if you need that for your project. One thing to note is how this works with library materials. This now offers you an option to kind of share input materials across your process if you're not yet onboarded to our library. Our library does offer kind of more capabilities to be able to use these materials across projects and across processes, where today the process is determined on where you created that material. So you will be able to kind of use both complementary, but we do recommend kind of one approach. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an example of an intermediate. Here I have my elution buffer now, in my elution step, and I'm producing an eluate, which is later going to be consumed as it's an intermediate material that's produced from my elution step from my first chromatography unit and then consumed later as the load material in my next unit operation. So here you can see, I'll hop to full screen. Oh, sorry, right here. You can see I have same relationship to process widget. I know, hey, I'm going to produce this and then consume it. So I know it's an intermediate material. And then you have a breakdown now of where it's produced from and then where it's later consumed. So this does work across unit operations. But again, just to highlight, it's functioning within the same process. All right. And then you can add additional inputs to this as well if desired. So that wraps up the introduction, to the relationship to process widget and how to label your materials. It's pretty straightforward, but let us know if you have questions. If you want a more detailed walkthrough, then definitely reach out to us. So next, I'm going to go to this next theme, which is right product, right country. And this is all about helping specifically companies, enterprise, large companies that have a lot of products globally distributed in different markets. There's a lot of management in making sure that your products that you're actually producing and the specifications that they come in at meet the regulatory commitments that you made per each market. So what we did here is that we wanted to, one, be able to allow you to capture product variation. And we did that by adding new types of records. So we added a new drug substance and a new drug product record. Again, these were implicit materials. They were called out through your final quality attributes and through your IQAs in your process, but they were never, they didn't have their own record in their own home. But we wanted to create that, especially when it comes to reporting and creating your regulatory documents. This is where you can pull the information directly from. So the next part that we did is we introduced these records in the product module, but we're leveraging that new relationship to process widget to be able to pull these into your process. So you can now map which specific variation is made at which site using which process. And understanding all of these kind of connections and relationships together is going to help you get that right specific product variation and that right product to that right country. Okay. By creating these new records, by introducing this into the product, allowing you to tie it into the process and map it to a specific process, we also introduced this new linking relationship. And that is really the key here, because now you can compare your intermediate quality attributes, which are going to represent your site specifications, directly to your final quality attributes, which represent your global regulatory commitments. So we're creating this separation now, and that's going to create clarity from which you can compare and really understand, what my expectations are versus what I'm actually producing. And aligning those is how, again, you get that right product to the right country. So I'm going to hop into the software now to show you what these records look like and where to access them. So again, these records, drug substance and drug product, are separate records. Right now, they have a lot of the same functionality. They have the same sections. And so we tend to refer to them together. But just to make sure that they are two separate types of records. So in the product module here, this is where you'll be able to access them. You have your TPP, your QTPP, and now this new tab. You'll have a list view as well as a table view of this. You can see now, right, you can assign your variations and your codes, which is typically how these companies are tracking this information today and all of the different variations. Okay, you can see here we have our table view. So you have all the same kind of configurations and customized settings that you do with our dynamic tables today. And then I'm going to show you what this record looks like. So here is a mock-up record of a drug substance. Looks very familiar because it is modeled, right? It's modeled similar to our material records. This is really, a drug substance is a material that's related to the process, but it's a specific type. It has more importance. It's really your product that you're creating. So here you have that relationship to process widget that I just introduced. One thing to note is that for drug substances and drug products, this the material type is going to be by default an output, right, to your process. So here you're going to have output always selected. That is important to note. So you want to associate it with that last step, right, or last UL where it's being produced from. So the nice part here is that you can select which process that it's associated with. You can select the unit operation and then the step that it is. And you have that function section as well. So again, it's really just the same widget, just in this new type of record. Okay. The next important new section that we added is this attributes table. This now is really, again, it's allowing you to explicitly call out your drug substance and drug product variations. And this is really going to be where you can differentiate them. Not only can you differentiate with what process it's associated with, right? So the scale, the site, all of that, that's captured in the process definition. But you can also differentiate by what regulatory commitments that you're making. So previously, we had you were able to call out your final quality attributes in QTBP, but you didn't have the ability to kind of specify and tailor to what variations these applied to. And so here, you can call out the specific attributes and list them here. We know that some markets require other attributes, or they require you to report on them. And so if that applies to this variation, then you can do that. If it doesn't, then you don't need to include it, and you get that clearer picture and clearer grouping. So here I'm going to show you how to use this. It's a straightforward table. You just go ahead and add final quality attribute. When you click that, you're going to see a list of the FQAs that you've created. You can scroll down and select again which ones apply to this specific drug substance. So if you've already selected some, so you saw that I had a few selected, they won't appear in this list because they're already selected. I can add, capsid, protein identity, genome identity. Let's add the HCP. And then let me go ahead and add here. If you need to reference it, you can view these records as well. So I add that. When we scroll down to the table, we see that they've added right here. And then I can go ahead and save it. And now I know exactly which FQAs apply to this variation. I can go ahead and also, remove them if I need to. So I'm going to save this record, and then I'm going to show you really the key of why we set up these records. Like, we really want you to be able to use this and compare the acceptance criteria of what your site, specifications are to what those commitments are. So when I scroll back down to this attribute table, once you've added your attributes and listed it here, you can go ahead and you'll see, right, this add intermediate quality attribute, or you'll see something that says linked to an IQA record and the name of the IQA record. So what we have here is when you click this, let's say for genome titer, you're going to be able to create an IQA directly from this FQA record that you already created. So we're also leveraging the work that you've done so that you can do that kind of, you direct mapping, right? And we'll be able to establish that linkage to connect it. You can change the name here if there's a different name at your site. You can choose to link it or not link it. So this could just be, an easy shortcut for you to make this new record and make sure you have all of the IQAs required at the site. And you can also establish this relationship. It's going to add this new record directly associated to the drug substance in your Process Explorer tree. So where IQA records are in your in Process Explorer, and so this will just be associated with the drug substance. Okay, and then you can press create. All right, I'm going to show you an example of where I already created one. Let's see, I already created one here. Okay, so here we have, now I'm in the Process Explorer looking at the process. When I scroll down and open my last unit operation, I'm going to see the output material, the drug substance. When I open this, this shows the same drug substance record that I just showed you that was in the product module, but now it's appearing for convenience in the process module. And then when I scroll down here, you can see that I have the intermediate quality attributes. Let's open endotoxins so I can show you the example. So one, you'll have the banner at the top that it's linked to the FQA. You can choose to unlink this if you need, if you're changing something, if it's a different requirement that it needs to be linked to, then that's not an issue. And then here is the best part. When you have this record open in your IQA, if you have that linkage established, what you're going to be able to see is in this gray box, we're kind of reflecting in, we're bringing in that FQA acceptance criteria so that you can clearly reference this when you're managing the information for the site specifications in your IQA. So again, this is, bringing that information together so that it's a clear reference and a clear comparison, so that you know when you're managing your site specifications and you're changing your process and you're ensuring that you have control and quality over it to produce your quality products, that it fits within the commitments that you made. So again, creating that clear kind of space for each of these types of specifications, and then also bringing them together in a view for you to be able to effectively manage this information. Great. So with that, that wraps up my part of the demo. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Yashka to show us the new risk features.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, I'm very happy to show you now what we can do in risk assessments now in QB Division. So we have now enabled classification to support also qualitative or label-based risk assessments in our process records. And you can come into the system and you can customize between risk ranking and classification for all of these different record types that we have in the process area today. And instead of calculations, you can now use a risk label that's just defining the risk of this particular parameter or quality attribute that you want to risk assess here. So why do you want to do that, right? So there's certain scenarios that we can think of. Maybe you have more why you want to do that. First being, for example, exploring a new modality where you have less information to do risk assessments. You want to do a lighter version of a risk assessment first, but you want to have something solid in your hand as a company, right? So you might want to do a classification-based risk assessment where you just assign a label. Okay, we think this is critical now, instead of a calculated value where you need to know uncertainty, where you need to know the impact explicitly to do a risk ranking, right? So another way is, for example, you are a large organization with commercial manufacturing, and you want to make sure that your manufacturing folks are not overwhelmed by information around risk. So you just want to reduce the information burden on people and just give them the information. Okay, this is critical. It's enough for them to know that and to deal with that for working properly. Right, so along these lines, this can be used. Also, we have here the reference material in Confluence. So if you want to dig deeper into this feature, please have a look here. And with that, I'm going to jump into the software to give you an idea how it looks like. So whenever you start creating a new project, right, you're now prompted to this new project creation page where in the risk assessment area, you can pick and choose between the different parameter types if they are going to appear in the classification or in the risk ranking mode. So labeled versus calculated risk. There's also the risk management plans need to also be set up in a certain way to support classification. I'm going to go there in a minute, but just that you have seen this. This is the way how you edit this, and then you can save it. And once you have saved it and you have started creating records, let's say I have created my first process parameter, I have created my first IQA, IPA, material attribute, all these fields will turn gray so that they're no longer editable. So you basically staying with one of the risk assessment types once you have selected those so that people don't switch between all the time. So you have consistency in your projects. okay, if we look at the RMP, then here in this case, what's changing is that you don't need uncertainty anymore, right? You're not calculating anything. You don't need values. You're just interested in the labels that are being used. So to do that, because QBD Vision is using calculations in the background, you need to set up your impact scores here as if there would be criticality labels, basically. So let's say I have here two different labels. I have an operational parameter. I have a critical parameter here to select from. So two levels, a 2 and a 4 here, right? So that 2 and 4 doesn't really matter here. What's important is if you go to criticality, you need exactly these two levels here as well. They should match with the risk label, because the risk label is what you're going to be seeing in all the records in QBD Vision once you have done the risk assessment. So the risk labels, they show everywhere because they're based on this calculation that's no longer existing for you, but in the back end it's still calculated. So this is important to know. What's also important is, I mean, uncertainty needs to be off, and always critical needs to be off as well, because otherwise you would get weird combinations of labels being displayed incorrectly. So this is like this one-to-one match that you need in the software to set this up correctly. All right, having said that, we can go into the software. So let's say I have here my aging process, and I'm going into my anion exchange chromatography step. I'm in the load, and I want to look at load conductivity here for now. I opened this record here already. So you can see now in the criticality assessment area, and what you have is a risk label here that you can set. So you will now see colors and also the descriptions of these values directly in the dropdown. So this is something new that we're bringing in with this release. On top of that, we have added a risk label justification field, because what we enable you to do now is also don't link to anything, right? With risk ranking, you would always need to link to add some record to do a risk assessment, right? Here, you can not link to anything and still do a risk assessment for your particular parameter, and you might want to justify why this is critical, for example, right? We highly encourage you to still link whenever there's something to link here, and you can still do that by like adding this, right? And the only difference here is now when you add something, you don't have a calculated value per item that you're adding here, right? So there's no uncertainty and impact value per added quality or final attribute here. Instead, you just set that up here. So no calculations, all the other fields remain. You can still justify individually. You have these effect on attribute fields that you can set by yourself, right, based on existing or already used fields to get some structure in there. And then you can also go into source documents and properly reference to these new fields that we have entered into the software, like risk label justification here, to make sure that you have your studies and so on perfectly justifying why you have selected these labels. Okay, having said that, one very prominent view that we have in the software is also our risk map, right? So you were used to see that whenever there's something critical here, it's linked to something, right? I said you don't need to do that anymore. So you can now also see parameters that are not linked to anything, but still getting a risk label as a CPP here, in this case, right? And opening this record here, you can see that, for example, this is now a regulatory requirement. I can just capture that here in my justification field so that people know, okay, I have to do that, but it's not related to any quality or performance attribute that I can actually link to, right? It's just something that the agency wants, and I can add here also the documentation around that, why I have to do that, right? So like an OPV protocol, whatever you can think of. And that's one way to use that feature. Another way is in our risk tables today, where you can do a cause and effect analysis, right? For example, here I'm plotting process parameters against intermediate and final attributes. So normally you would get the score from multiplying impact and uncertainty here. with the criticality label. So saying, okay, this is a CPP, non-CPP, and so on, right? But instead, you will see the effect on attribute field here to get an idea if there's an impact or not. And whenever there is an impact, it's going to turn into a CPP, right? So this is the new expected behavior here and how to use that part of the software so that you can still do cause and effect matrices without calculations in the backend. Another very important area is, of course, our doc builder feature, right? So also here we enable you to generate reports for process parameters. For example, here I'm filtering for our conductivity example here, where you can introduce all the new information like the risk label that we just introduced into the software and the general justification field. So they can be pulled in here from the criticality assessment area, together with all the other fields that we still have. Then you can also still use all these linked attribute and justification information with a more specialized submodel, so the process parameter criticality table. So you can just add that as well here. This here, right? If you insert this, you can also get the individual fields here from the intermediates or final quality attributes that you're adding per parameter here in this case. Okay, and with that, I am done with my presentation on the risk feature, and I'm very happy to take your questions.
All right. We do have a couple questions that came in. Yashka, thank you both, Yashka and Natalie, for that great review. I think our team, our customers are going to be super excited about these. So, Yashka, since we just talked about classification, we'll start with you. A question has come in. Can you apply the risk classification to a project that has already had a risk ranking done?
Great question. Thank you, Jean-Marie. Currently, you can't. I mean, I showed you that it's basically grayed out once you start creating a record. We are working on a migration tool to enable you guys in the future to switch seamlessly between risk assessment types. So you can expect that coming in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, great news. Okay. Natalie, I've got one for you if you're ready. Can I add a DS or DP record to more than one project and process?
Hi, thank you for that question. That's a very good question and a clarification that I want to make. So right now you can't. We're keeping it to one DSDP, right? One DS or one DP record added to one process. The reason that we did this is we wanted to start simple, start clean, keep the information clean, and work from there. The more that we are able to kind of parameterize the information and keep those relationships straightforward, the better that we're able to help with the reporting, right? The easier it is to call on these specific information, the specific relationships. If we open that up to more, we will have to think about how that affects kind of downstream activities and requirements.
Okay, that's great. All right, another one has come in. Natalie, this is another one for you on input-output materials, it looks like. What will happen to my doc builder reports that already list my materials?
So your materials in your doc builder reports, those won't be affected. Your materials are still accessible, right? We reference them in doc builder on their name. So nothing is going to change there.
All right. It looks like I have another classification risk question. So Yashka, this one over to you. Do I have to change my current RMPs to use classification with a brand new project?
Yes. Right. I explained a little bit the the caveat that we need a one-to-one match between impact and criticality and uncertainty to be off, right? I could just say, okay, go to our Confluence page and have a detailed look. There's a very detailed description on how to do that, actually, right? So that you make sure that you see what you want to see. We're also working on doing this in the back end so that once you have or the intention to use an RMP for classification, that you don't have to set up your criticality by yourself, right, with these percentages, but just take the impact scores and they're calculated in the back end for you and reusing the same colors and so on, right, so that it gets a little bit easier in the future.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you. Natalie, I have another one for you on input and output materials. What will happen to, did I already ask this one? What will happen to my dot builder reports that already list my materials?
Yep, that one was asked.
That one was that. Okay. Can I add an output material from one UO as an input material to another UO? So unit operation, can I add an output material from one unit operation as an input material to another unit operation?
So again, this touches upon the labeling of the material. So you can do this if you label your material as an intermediate. Again, my best recommendation for how to use this widget is start by thinking, in regards to my process, is this material an input where it's only consumed? Is this material an intermediate where it's produced and then consumed within that same process? Or is it an output where it's only produced from this process? So in order to create it as an output of one unit operation and an input to the next unit operation within that same process, that is really the definition of an intermediate material. And it breaks down into an output of and an input to in regards to the steps. So in that case, make sure that it's an intermediate material. If you were to select output in that regard, you can just change it over without issue, because output, we only allow you to select to type in one location for the output, which makes sense, right? When you're working through your process and adding that information, the output really only is produced in one place. If it's produced in another place, then it's a different output or deserves a different material record.
All right, that was really good. The way you explained the way to think about it, if it's an input or an intermediate out, that was really good. I think we should add that maybe in our write-up when we send this out. That was really good for me. Okay, I have another question that came in. Another one on input and output materials. So Natalie, this one is you again. How do you then label and use the output of a process, for example, a drug substance, as an input in another process, for example, a drug product?
Yeah, so today you would have to have two separate records for process. Right now, none of our other capabilities or functionality works cross processes. So it's really in regards to just treat that process as a bubble. We didn't want to open it up again. We wanted to start simple, especially when rolling out this new feature. And with going across processes, there's other complexities that we want to work through and make sure we build the right structure, especially, in connecting the processes. We didn't want to make the call immediately by just allowing you to do this and then, potentially kind of messing up relationships or muddling the relationships across processes later on. So today we recommend having that separation. If you really need to see it as an input again, just create that separate record for right now.
Okay, that's great. And it looks like we might have one more. Can I add DS and DP? There's another one for you, Natalie. Can I add DS and DP record information in Doc Builder?
Yes. So I didn't have time to show that today, but that drug substance and drug product, it appears in your smart content menu. It will appear in the dropdown. You'll see the separate headers after QTPP and TPP again, in that product module with all the product module information. And then you can just click through the drop downs in the headers, and all of the section and the information in the record will be accessible.
Oh, great. All right. I want to give everybody just one more chance to jump into the Q&A section of Zoom to ask another question. I think we have asked and answered everything that has come in so far. Anybody else? All right, I do not see anything else coming in. Of course, everyone on the call, if you have any questions that you think of, or as you rewatch the webinar in a couple of days when we get it out, please contact your CSM team to answer questions, and we can, of course, loop in our esteemed product team if we need to get those answers for you. But otherwise, I think we can go ahead and sign off. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope this was well worthwhile your time. It certainly was great for us to do this for you, and we will be sending out the recording and the deck and the Q&A in a couple days. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.